Hello and welcome to the Fall 2020 3-Minute Thesis event. My name is Natalia Bauer and I'm an Assistant Director for the College of Graduate Studies, and I'll be your event host for today. Before we get started, we'd like to invite Dr. Elizabeth Klonoff, Vice President for Research and the Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, to make some welcoming remarks. Dr. Klonoff?
Thank you, Natalia. So, as all of you know already, scholarship is a very complicated thing. It begins with an idea or an inspiration. It moves towards actualizing that idea or inspiration by conducting the study, etc. And then it comes to writing, then it moves to writing it up and communicating it. And the part of why I like this event and part of why I think it's so important is for years we've emphasized how you think of the idea, what your methods are, how you do your measurements, etc. But we've really underemphasized how you communicate. And communication of our research is so important. Part of the difficulties that we're having now in terms of people disagreeing about the pandemic and their responses to the pandemic have to do with science's bad job, really, in communicating what it does and how it does it and what the outcomes are. So the nice thing about this event is it requires students to communicate what they're doing and why and what the outcomes are in a way that's clear enough so that even I can understand it. So I'm not going to take up any more time because I really look forward to this event. This is the third time we've had it, Natalia. Is that? Yes. I always look forward to this event. So I don't want to hear me talk. I want to hear you talk. So thank you all for participating and congratulations on being here.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Dr. Klonoff. Let's move to our first slide. Our next slide. Thank you. All right, let's learn a little bit about today's event. As the name implies, presentations are limited to only 3 minutes, and our presenters could only have one PowerPoint slide. So the goal of the event is to help doctoral students with their academic, presentation, research, communication skills, all of these things rolled in one. Like Dr. Klonoff said, this is our third event here at UCF, but events have been held since 2008 at over 600 institutions across 65 countries worldwide. Today's competition has 10 presenters who were selected from many entries by a committee. They're all doctoral students in candidacy. But before we get to the presenters, we'd like to thank our event judges for today. So next slide, please. Our judging panel for this year's event were uniquely qualified as they all either work with graduate students or maybe undergraduates hoping to go to graduate school. Our first judge was from the UCF Division of Learning and Academic Research and Office of Undergrad Research, Michael Alderando Jeffries. Our next judge was Corinne Bishop from the UCF Libraries Research and Information Services. She is actually the graduate liaison. And our final judge was Brian Creel, the Assistant Director for UCF Career Services. He is also a graduate student liaison. And we just want to thank all of our judges for taking the time to review the presentations of our 10 finalists. You're probably wondering, what did they use to actually choose their top 3? There will be 3 top presenters out of our 10 today. So let's go to our next slide. The important things that the judges had to keep in mind were 2 main criteria: comprehension and content. Did the presentation of the students help somebody understand their research better? The second thing was engagement and communication. Did the presentation make you want to learn more? Was the topic and its significance communicated in a language appropriate to an intelligent but non-specialist audience? This is probably the most important part. So our judges made their decisions on the top winners, and let's go to our next slide to learn what they'll actually win. Our top 10 were competing for 3 prizes today. First place of $1,000, a runner-up of $750, and a third place at $250. These are scholarship awards that will go to the top 3. We'd like to thank the College of Graduate Studies and the Office of Research for providing the funding for these awards. We also want to congratulate all of our presenters for participating and making this far, because we had a lot of entries and the competition to be a finalist was actually really tough. Let's actually meet our 10 finalists. So next slide, please. First, we have Anicia Arredondo, physics PhD student, Erin Kidder, sociology PhD, Ansu Sebastian, nursing PhD, Emily Ross, psychology PhD, Emmanuel Okogbue, electrical engineering, Justin Smith, criminal justice, Mohammad Rabbi, mechanical engineering, Kristen Iannuzzi, educational leadership EDD, Lauren Thomas, curriculum and instruction EDD, and Megan Aubin, material science and engineering. So now that we know who we'll be watching today, we're going to go ahead and get right into our presentations. And our first finalist is Anicia Arredondo, physics PhD. Next slide, please.
In the early hours of February 15, 2013, the Chelyabinsk meteor collided with the Earth, causing a massive shockwave that injured over 1,500 people. This event was inevitable. There are 4,700 asteroids whose orbits come close enough to the Earth that they could potentially collide with us. In the center plot, I show a top-down view of our solar system, including the orbits of some of the planets, as well as the location of the asteroid belt. Gravitational interactions between the asteroids and the larger planets can cause some of the asteroid orbits to get a little bit wonky, as shown here by a pink line. These are called near-Earth asteroids, or NEAs for short. It's NEAs like this that could cause catastrophe, just like the Chelyabinsk meteor. In my research, I study the main belt origins of NEAs using what's called reflectance spectroscopy. A reflectance spectrum is the amount of light reflected back from an asteroid at different wavelengths. A spectrum is material dependent, so by understanding the spectrum, we can infer what type of material the asteroid is made of. And composition of an asteroid is vital if we ever need to redirect one. I study groups of asteroids along the inner edge of the main asteroid belt, and I compare them with different NEAs in order to establish links between them. An example of this is seen in the rightmost plot. The red spectrum is a spectrum of an NEA 162173 Ryugu. Ryugu is a potentially hazardous asteroid whose orbit comes within 20% of the distance between us and the moon. Ryugu is also particularly exciting right now because the Japanese Space Agency recently sent a mission to Ryugu to collect a sample of the surface material, which will now be returned to the Earth for further analysis. So we will soon definitively know what this NEA is composed of. In the top plot, I compare the spectrum of Ryugu with the average spectrum of a group of asteroids. And as you can see, the concavity of the two spectra don't quite match up. The comparison with the second group of asteroids in the middle plot is slightly better. However, there's still disagreement at shorter wavelengths. The comparison with group 3 in the lower plot is a much better match, and it's almost perfect within the errors. So in this case, we would say Ryugu's source region is group 3, and therefore the composition of Ryugu will most likely be like the composition of the asteroids in group 3. And we can use this technique to characterize a wide variety of NEAs, which will give us vital information should we ever need to redirect one. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to our next presenter. Next slide is Erin Kidder from Sociology PhD.
I love animals. In fact, most people with whom I interact are eager to profess their love for other animals. But who are these other animals? Dogs, cats, horses, cows, pigs, cockroaches? Yes, you heard me right with the cockroaches, but we'll save that for another day. Today, I want to talk about how we love other animals, and I'd like to present this through the lens of stock shows and rodeos. After all, at these events, all at once, people love being entertained by animals, people love admiring the competition featuring other animals, and people like wearing and eating other animals. Suffice it to say, humans have a complicated relationship with our fellow creatures. I like to think about this relationship in two ways. The first is as a social construction, a social arrangement constructed based on the wants and needs of humans. The second is as a range of speciesist behaviors on the part of humans, where we determine what we are willing to accept and not willing to accept in the way of exploiting and harming other animals. For context, speciesism is essentially the exploitation of non-human animals by humans. So you can think of this in terms of the other isms in our society, such as racism, sexism, and so forth. I set out to examine this unique and complicated relationship with other animals by spending several weeks observing the human, non-human interactions at stock shows and rodeos. I also interviewed 24 people who either show animals at stock shows, who compete at rodeos, or who simply attend as spectators. By doing so, I've been able to better understand the ways in which humans explicitly and implicitly connect and also disconnect from other animals as a means to justify their love of animals in very compartmentalized ways. For example, I'm able to identify ways in which people develop techniques of neutralization, allowing them to lovingly raise an animal from birth only to sell that animal off for slaughter. I can better understand what it is that makes us cheer on a bull rider who successfully stays on a bull who clearly does not want anyone riding him. I can recognize the cognitive dissonance associated with people simultaneously oohing and awing a cute little calf while eating a hamburger. And while I have heard that bucking horses, bulls, and steers love what they do, I consider whether this is learned helplessness or habitualized performance, whereby the animal is socialized to a behavior in the same way a child is to follow the rules of proper conduct. Sociology, in a nutshell, is the study of our social lives, and indeed our social lives are enhanced in one way or another by our interactions with and our exploitation of other animals, much in the same way as with humans. They are our companions, our protectors, our non-human workforce, our therapy, our entertainment, our clothing, and our food. Therefore, it is imperative for us to include non-human animals in our social inquiries in an effort to improve our social relations with them, again, in the same way we do with our fellow humans. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Erin. Let's go to our next slide. Our next presenter is Ansu Sebastian from Nursing PhD.
Hello, everyone. How many of you think our healthcare is highly affordable and of a high quality? Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services have been addressing this issue for many, many years. In 2012, they implemented hospital readmission reduction program aimed at decreasing healthcare costs and improving the quality of care. According to this program, hospitals were penalized to have hospital readmissions within 30 days of index admission. That said, my patient population of interest is surgical patients. A medical patient, let's say somebody who has pneumonia, they get some antibiotics, they get treated, they go back home, continue their treatment for a few days, and hopefully make a full recovery. Well, my surgical patients who had major abdominal and colorectal surgeries, when they go home, they have to take care of their new incision. They probably are still in pain. They probably have to take care of a new drainage bag or a tube and drain that they never had before. And sometimes they're not even able to tolerate their diet. This increases the risk of readmission among this patient population from about 4 to 30%. Each time these patients get readmitted, it increases the healthcare cost to approximately $15,366 and encompasses around $4 million to Medicare and Medicaid services. That is healthcare cost, including for you and me. With the penalty imposed to healthcare organizations, many hospitals adopted evidence-based strategies to prevent readmissions among this patient population. This included text messaging, telephone follow-up, use of a care coordinator, and so on and so forth. However, not one method is all-encompassing and producing consistent results. The one thing that we forgot here is our primary stakeholder, who is the patient. Did we go back to that patient and ask what brought them back to the hospital? What do they think the readmission was because? As healthcare providers, what could we have done differently to prevent this rehospitalization? In fact, that is one question that brought me to this proposal, where a patient answered, Well, you girls are very nice here and I have 24/7 company. I'm bored at home. So this bring us back to the importance of including our patients while developing the right strategy for them. Hence, I propose a mixed method study where I will be doing in-depth interviews with these patients and combining that information with their clinical data. And hoping that in future, I'll be able to develop the ideal strategy to prevent readmissions among these patients. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next presenter is Emily Ross from Psychology PhD program.
Have you ever had butterflies in your stomach or a gut feeling? Ever felt sick to your stomach when you're anxious and nervous? Well, these sensations speak to the gut-brain axis model. The gut-brain axis model suggests that there's a bidirectional communication pathway between the gut and the brain. In other words, the gut speaks to the brain and the brain speaks to the gut. This area of research is called psychogastroenterology. Psychogastroenterology investigates the complex interplay between psychological functioning and gastrointestinal health. In fact, gastrointestinal symptoms are some of the most common and burdensome reasons for visits to the doctor. Digestive diseases account for 100 million ambulatory care visits annually. What we're finding is that gastrointestinal symptoms do not discriminate according to age. A recent study showed that in a third of an emerging adult sample, so those between the ages of 18 to 25, endorsed moderately to severe gastrointestinal symptoms, as well as reported experiencing anxiety and depressive symptoms. The National Institute of Mental Health has reported that those between the ages of 18 to 25 have the highest rate of any mental illness compared to any other age group. And 1 in 4 emerging adults will experience a depressive episode. Researchers have hypothesized that emerging adults are not only experiencing high rates of psychological problems, but that gastrointestinal symptoms, including abdominal pain, gas and bloating, and diarrhea, can be a global challenge for those enrolled in university. This is where my research comes in. I'm investigating the reciprocal effect of gastrointestinal symptoms on disability, quality of life in an emerging adult sample. I have asked 861 emerging adults all about their gastrointestinal symptoms, psychological status, quality of life, and disability status. And I've asked these questions at 2 different points in time. This will allow me to explore functioning in gastrointestinal symptoms over time. I hope that my research will reveal empirical recommendations for the assessment and treatment of those experiencing psychological problems, as well as gastrointestinal difficulties.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Our next presenter is Emmanuel Okogbue from Electrical Engineering.
The changes in technology over the past 50 years have been amazing. Televisions went from being black and white to being colored. Computers went from needing air-conditioned rooms to being the laptops that we have now. Phones went from being wired to being mobile. And communication changed from post mails to emails and to virtual meetings and presentations that we have now. Healthcare also changed from compulsory visits to the doctor to having portable gadgets that can measure some of your vitals from the comfort of your home. These advancements in technology have been driven by some important materials, such as silicon and germanium. But what if I told you that the same way we look at old technology from the 60s and we consider it bulky and slow, it's the same way we'll look at current technology in the future and we consider it rigid and limited because of the new materials we would have. My PhD research at UCF is focused on taking us to this even more exciting future of electronics using 2-dimensional materials. 2-dimensional materials are a new class of materials that are recently discovered. These materials have length and width, but their thickness is so small it's in the atomic scale. These materials are transparent, they have good electronic properties, they're flexible and stretchable, yet they're stronger than diamond. My research is focused on creative engineering techniques, such as growth and patterning, to be able to realize the full potential of these materials. Now, through my research and collaborations, I've been able to make some prototype inventions to give us a glimpse into what the future of electronics holds. These include stretchable electronic components like conductors and also transistors, which you can stretch out without losing current, or smart windows that are capable of self-defogging themselves, and also smart display with application of a little voltage. And also wearable heating pads that have fast temperature control, which are applicable for thermotherapeutics. And our smart tattoo sensors, which are capable of measuring human vitals like EMG and ECG, and also body temperature. I believe my research will bring about this exciting future where you won't have to worry about breaking your iPhone cord. Or when you think about smart devices, it's not limited to your phones and tablets and computers, but also extended to your automobile car windows, the windows in your house, and even smart packaging boxes. And also where your tattoo is not just a tattoo, but it's a smart sensor that lets both you and your doctor know when you have a fever. This feature of electronics is lightweight, it's cheap, with high performance, and has the potential to save a lot of lives. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next presenter is Justin Smith from Criminal Justice PhD program.
Hello, my name is Justin Smith, and I'm a doctoral student in the Criminal Justice Department, and today I'm going to be sharing my dissertation research with you. In May of 2020, George Floyd died after an altercation with police officers in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This triggered rioting in Minneapolis as well as several large US cities. Even though this just happened as a current event, it's actually part of a reoccurring theme throughout history, and that the police have had historically poor relations with communities, especially disadvantaged communities and minority communities. Despite this, there have been a number of innovations proposed that are supposed to help the police improve their relationships with the communities and also solve crime problems. For instance, community-oriented policing suggests that police officers interact with citizens to understand problems that the community wants the police to address. Problem-oriented policing suggests that the police analyze crime and social problems and devise creative solutions to those problems that don't necessarily involve law enforcement tactics such as arrest. Community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing have both been evaluated scientifically and have been shown to reduce crime and also to improve police and community relationships. However, we know that a lot of police officers are reluctant to use these innovations in practice and actually resist and reject them. The question is why? I'm suggesting that there's two theoretical orientations that can help us break down and solve this problem. The first is police culture. We know that police officers are members of a unique occupational culture, and some of the themes of this culture are the antithesis of the attitudes that are necessary to do community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing. For instance, officers tend to view citizens as hostile and disrespectful. Obviously, this does not coalesce well with the collaborative partnerships that officers are supposed to build under community-oriented policing. Also, we know officers tend to focus on the bottom line, arresting offenders, and traditional law enforcement tactics. This doesn't really work with problem-oriented policing, which suggests more creative solutions to problems. Another possible direction that could help is innovation resistance theory. So we know that innovations that introduce discontinuities into existing routines tend to be rejected. And I think this might be a problem with community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing. So to really understand this problem, I think we need to go to the source of it, which would be the police officers themselves. I'm actually working in a partnership with two police departments, and I'm going to be conducting interviews as well as surveys of their officers to understand how they feel about innovations and whether or not they feel that these innovations are effective or not, and some problems that they may have with implementing them in practice. Why is all this important? It's important because we know that these innovations, community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing, are effective in reducing crime and improving police and community relations. If officers resist using them, then they're not being used to their fullest potential. If they are used, then we should see safer communities, safer streets, and better police and community relations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Justin. Next slide, our next presenter is Mohammad Rabbi from Mechanical Engineering.
Can you imagine how much heat your computer or smartphone is generating as you're watching this video right now? It can be as high as 50 megawatts per square meter, which is nearly the same amount of heat radiated by the sun. And as these devices continue to get hotter and hotter, their performance goes down significantly and they eventually fail. Moreover, in recent times, these devices are not only getting hotter, but also have decreased in dimensions so that they can fit right into our pockets, and also have become flexible so that we can wear them eventually. For these reasons, we need a versatile cooling technology in place. But cooling these modern devices and machines of such small form factors has become the real problem. My doctoral research aims to solve this problem by introducing a novel cooling system that is easy to fabricate, flexible, and is able to cool down very hot devices. In essence, we fabricate a polymer-based vertically stacked system inside which water flows through a number of interconnected tiny channels. These channels are so tiny that they're just 10 times the thickness of a human hair. You must be wondering now how the water can flow through these tiny channels. Remember when you touch a napkin on a pool of water and how water climbs on the napkin? Yes, we build on this very idea and make these channels so tiny that the water can flow from one location to another without any aid from an external pump. And while flowing like that, it takes the heat away very efficiently from the hot device. In result, this keeps the device far away from overheating. Just imagine a cool water bath we all want on a hot sunny day. I believe that the outcomes of this research will provide engineers, scientists, and researchers a unique understanding to design liquid cooling technology for future generation systems. This way, together, we can beat the heat. Thus, the devices and machines can perform even better, and we can keep on pushing the boundaries.
All right, thank you. Our next presenter is Kristen Iannuzzi from the Educational Leadership EDD program.
I was in the 9th grade when a terrorist attack on a high school made Columbine a household name. It has been over 20 years, yet the impact of that day remains seared into the memories of an entire generation. Columbine was not the first school shooting, but the magnitude of the rampage marked the beginning of an era. 2 decades of mass shootings followed, and more educational institutions were added to a list of infamous massacres. Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and these are just the ones that seem heinous enough to grab our attention. Sound unlikely? The 5th deadliest school shooting in American history occurred at Santa Fe High School in May of 2018. Just 3 months after the attack on Stoneman Douglas, 10 people were slaughtered, and I would venture to guess that there are individuals here today that have never even heard of it. It's not entirely surprising. After all, Santa Fe was only one of the over 220 school attacks since Columbine. The rise of mass shootings in the 21st century has led to a series of investigations. From these findings, we know that a custodian named Rick Thorne ran across Sandy Hook Elementary School, locking doors, alerting teachers, and saving children. We know that a professor at Virginia Tech gave his life barricading a door with his body, while a teacher at Stoneman Douglas survived doing the very same thing. We know that both of these heroic educators instinctively saved the lives of innocent students because we know that the rapidly evolving nature of active shooter events means that the instantaneous decisions made by civilians are often the difference between life and death. In school settings, we know that educators are significantly more likely to stop an active shooter than law enforcement. And we also know that the call to train school-based personnel for an attack has never been greater. What we don't know is the most effective means of preparing educators for a school shooting. Safety experts across the nation have identified teachers as the true first responders, and yet the extent of most of their training is watching a video or participating in a lockdown drill. If educators have such a significant impact on the outcome of school shootings, why are they not being provided the same training opportunities as other first responders? While virtual simulation is already used by law enforcement for emergency preparedness, it is not widely used in the educational setting for this purpose. The Department of Homeland Security created the Enhanced Dynamic Geosocial Environment. This virtual sandbox known as EDGE provides opportunities to practice responding to a school shooting in a safe and controlled environment. Since studies have shown that simulated experiences improve survivability in law enforcement, my research considers educators' perception of using EDGE to prepare for a school shooting. Teachers will have the opportunity to train on the same platform as other first responders. This may not only provide a scalable, cost-effective, and efficient means of training, but it also has the potential to ensure that if educators are ever faced with a life-threatening event, they can draw on a more dynamic experience than just watching a video to respond. We know that most school shootings end prior to law enforcement arrival. Therefore, teachers can no longer passively wait to be rescued. Instead, my research empowers educators to actively pursue survival.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Our next presenter is Lauren Thomas from the Curriculum and Instruction EDD program.
Right now, in one of my college algebra courses I'm teaching, I have two students who quickly come to mind, Ashley and Jackson. Now, Ashley, she's my star student. She has the highest grade in the class, is always prepared, and stays engaged. Jackson, however, is the complete opposite. He shows up late to class, he's not focused, and completely uninterested in the class altogether. Now, when I was describing my students, did you picture Ashley as Black and Jackson as white? Probably not, but why would you? Unfortunately, a great amount of time and research has contributed to the overgeneralization that all Black and brown students are low achieving, disengaged, and uninterested in their learning. This narrative must be interrupted. This deficit way of thinking ignores the diversity and achievements of minoritized groups of students. My research combines student interviews and course completion data to create a comprehensive picture of what makes Black students successful. Using the strengths of both qualitative and quantitative data, factors are identified that influence the academic success of Black students taking college-level math courses. I chose to take this approach in my research because there's value in using personal experiences to shed light on statistical findings. We often make the mistake of letting numerical data paint the whole picture, when in actuality, statistics can only provide a glimpse of the canvas. This mixed method approach is powerful because I'm not ignoring the patterns and trends that I see, but I'm diligently working to find their cause by investigating the why. Because you see, once the right conditions are established for learning, anyone can achieve success. So why is this necessary? Well, in our ever-changing social climate, the way we talk about success and achievement influences how our students perceive themselves. So we must be mindful of our words and our actions. Because we've become so accustomed to associating race with different student characteristics, simply put, to be white is to be capable, while being Black is to be incompetent, we have made the success of white students the standard to which all students should aspire to. Don't believe me? Well, that's why one of the popular phrases in academic spaces is the achievement gap, where the success of minoritized groups of students is continuously compared to that of white students. In fact, we should really stop calling this an achievement gap altogether, because this places the blame on the students. This paradigm perpetuates the idea that Black and brown students need fixing. What we actually have here is an opportunity gap. As educators, we've missed opportunities to create equitable learning environments for all of our students. And we've done that by letting the statistics and charts tell the whole story of who these students are and what they have to offer. The goal of my research is to add to the counter-narrative being told by tons of great scholars about the academic achievement of Black students. It's my hope that the next time I present this scenario of Ashley and Jackson, the participants won't make the assumption of their race based on these characteristics. That small change in perspective would prove to be a major accomplishment for my work.
All right, thank you, Lauren. And our final presenter today will be Megan Aubin from Material Science Engineering program.
With the pandemic keeping us socially distant, we can still call up those close to us from wherever we are and remind them that you've got a friend in me. And we owe this daily utilized technology to the little black box that power our devices, the Nobel Prize winning lithium-ion battery. But we are now hitting theoretical power output capacities for lithium-ion batteries. And ideas some may call childhood imagination are actual business proposals just waiting for an advance in battery capability to make them a reality, such as automated electric helicopter taxis that can fly passengers to the opposite end of a city in minutes, avoiding the gridlocked streets below. And in fact, no carbon emission from electric cars in crowded cities means eliminating asthma-triggering pollution, which in the middle of a respiratory disease pandemic, for some could be literally life-saving. Necessary continued innovation requires batteries with higher energy density. In other words, a smaller and lighter battery that gives higher energy output. Coined in the battery community as beyond lithium ion, this advance is achieved by adding more lithium metal to the battery chemistry. But this advance comes at a cost: the formation of lithium dendrites, which are thin lithium metal fingers that grow from one side of the battery to the other as the battery cycles and is used and recharged multiple times. Catastrophic failure occurs when a dendrite successfully grows through the middle battery layer, the electrolyte, and contacts the other side, causing a short, which heats up until the liquid electrolyte combusts. So battery engineers replace the currently used flammable liquid electrolyte with a solid material 150 times stronger than lithium. Problem is, dendrites still grew. That's where I come in. My research seeks to explain what is happening during dendrite growth. Using a high-powered microscope, I can watch the dendritic formation as it grows on the nanoscale, visualizing a realm so small that materials behave differently than they do in bulk. I have calculated the force of these tiny lithium dendrites as they grow against the solid electrolyte. Force is 15 times higher than what a normal piece of lithium can exert. And I've shown that the speed at which these dendrites grow affects their maximum strength and direction. This atomic-sized window into the dendrite growth conditions provides crucial clues in finding a successful dendrite inhibiting solid electrolyte. When this happens, the impact of technological advances will be astronomical, advancing to infinity and beyond lithium ion.
All right. Thank you to all of our presenters. That is so awesome to have you all sharing your research with us today. We know this format was a little bit different, and we appreciate the flexibility of all of our presenters for doing it in this format. We'll be sending all of our presenters a certificate of participation and our winners some additional information about their scholarship awards. We could see that our judges had probably a pretty tough job of choosing just 3 out of these 10 for our scholarship awards, but without further ado, let's find out who they thought was their top 3. In third place, we have, let's go to our next slide, Anicia Arredondo. Congratulations, Anicia. Our next winner would be our runner-up. Next slide. Oh, we also have certificates, like we said, for each of our presenters. So this is what our presenters will receive and winners. Let's go to our next slide. Our runner-up is Khan Mohammad Rabbi from Mechanical Engineering. Congratulations to Khan Mohammad. And that's his certificate. And the moment we waiting for our winner is Lauren Thomas from Curriculum and Instruction EDD program. So congratulations to Lauren. And congratulations really to all of our presenters today. They did a terrific job doing their presentations in this format. We want to thank them, and we also want to thank our judges and thank all of you for coming today. If you enjoyed this event, we want to invite people to take part in our research week coming up in 2020. It'll be held March 19th through April 2nd. Everything for Research Week this year will be virtual, so you'll be able to participate from home just like you are today. Details will be added as we have them for all of our events at researchweek.ucf.edu. And again, we just want to thank you all so much for sharing this time with us and learning more about the research of our doctoral students here at UCF. This concludes our event.